Hello, I'm Chris Flisher, and welcome to Turning of the Wheel, an intelligent, lively discussion on astrology, art, and adventure. Timing is everything, and as the great wheel turns, we are best prepared when we are best informed. Join me as I explore the current planetary alignments and offer insights for coping with change. Educational, informative, enlightening, the Turning of the Wheel is a welcome pause in your daily swirl of constant change. Through intelligent discourse, inspired guests, and educational segments, I will help to enlighten your knowledge of astrology and guide you to accept change as the great wheel of life turns. Call in with your questions and speak with some of the greatest visionaries in the time-tested practice of astrology. Turning of the Wheel, Astrology, Art, and Adventure with Chris Flisher, each week on Turning of the Wheel podcast. Hello and welcome to Turning of the Wheel. As you know, this is a show about astrology, and that's why it's called Turning of the Wheel, because as the great wheel turns, we are best prepared and we are best informed. And astrology is a fantastic methodology for sort of getting insight into what may be coming down the road, at least the themes that are involved in our life coming forward, which is why it's so important to study. It really is remarkably accurate, provides great insight for the courses of the times that we're changing. We can see all the heartbreak and tragedy we're living through today. We can see the changes on the surface that are on our way. So it's really valuable. And so I try to get great people on to help discuss this, and there are very many. There's a lot of significant points in all the astrology charts that are worthwhile noting, and one of them is the Venus star point, which is coming up. Before we get started with my guest, I want to remind you about my newsletter, which goes out every Sunday, and there you'll find a couple of paragraphs of mundane astrology. You'll find links to the podcast, link to my television shows, and my educational materials, as well as an individual paragraph for each of the individual signs for the week to come. These are all broad-based themes, and I encourage you to use your intellect to tease out where it best works for you. You'll be able to determine that by looking at your sun sign and your rising sign, and you'll be able to say, wow, this theme really is happening to me. It's really accurate. So, it gives me great pleasure to have my friend on, Arielle Guttman, who is the author of Venus Star Rising. It's a new cosmology for the 21st century, but what it comes down to is the power of Venus in our lives and how it impacts us individually. We all have what's called a Venus star point in our lives, and it's a fascinating discovery of the importance of a singular planet and its influence in our lives. So welcome to the show, Arielle. It's always great to have you on today.
Thank you, Chris. It's always nice to be here.
Yeah, so we have a Venus star point coming up. Why don't you give us some background on what that looks like for us?
Okay, so everybody knows the planet Venus, right?
Sure, they better.
It's the bright star, you know, when we used to say starlight, star bright, first star I see tonight. Chances are that bright star was Venus because it's blazing bright in the night sky. And it's the brightest object in the sky after the sun and moon. So it really dazzles us. And so Venus, the planet, is connected to love and beauty and harmony and all those things that we astrologers know. It rules the signs of Taurus and Libra, and it's exalted in Pisces. So people that have that combination of Taurus, Libra, Pisces, any of that combination, have a very strong Venusian tone to their chart, to their life. And I would say that that's the natal Venus, and that's how we're used to thinking of it in astrology. Where is it by sign and by house in your chart, and how does it connect you to all those principles that we just mentioned? But the Venus star is actually a relationship. It's a dance between the Earth and the Sun, Earth and Venus around the Sun. And every 9.2 months, 9.3 months, which we know is the human gestation cycle, Venus makes a kiss to the sun with the Earth. When she and Earth are together, they make this cosmic kiss, which is astronomically and astrologically called the Cazimi, and that means right in the heart of the sun. So every 9.2
by degree,
months,
so that's by degree, so people know it's exactly by degree. Okay.
Right in the heart of the sun. Mm-hmm. And so they're going to be at the same exact degree. Now, when this happens every 9-something months, it lights up that region of our chart and our lives in a particular way because it's like the cosmic heartbeat. It's the stamp. It's the cosmic drumbeat, let's say, of the heartbeat of Venus and Earth, making that connection to the sun, that lineup. So this one's coming up on the 13th. The 13th in Pacific time zone where I am at 11 p.m. So for most people, on the globe, it's going to be on the 14th in the wee hours of the morning, or maybe over on the other side of the world in Europe and Asia, it'll be a little bit later in the day. But let's say the 13th and the 14th is the somewhere in the world is the magic moment that this Venus and the Earth and the Sun are all going to kiss in Leo, which is a bold, dramatic sign ruled by the Sun. So there's a lot of Leo kind of Sun solar aspects to that. What do we
Bold,
think of
creative.
Leo?
Yeah.
Yeah, and royalty and the crown and the king and people pounding their chest with great pride. And also people having the courage to stand up, finding the courage. I think of the cowardly lion in The Wizard of Oz.
Yeah.
He was searching for his courage. And when he finally, after joining Dorothy and this strange crew, which what lion would do that? But anyway, he did it. And once he made the journey, what he found out was he always had the courage. He just didn't know how to access it.
Right. Which is a wonderful story. I love that. Because I use the Wizard of Oz, I think, is a very horoscopic sort of parable. I think there's a lot of interesting parallels that come out of it. Just as a general statement, astrologically, the Wizard of Oz is remarkable. So.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
And even in mythic astrology, when I wrote that, when it was talking about fire, earth, air, and water, I was seeing Dorothy and her crew, you know,
Yeah.
each one of them representing a different aspect of that. You know, somebody was looking for a brain, air. Somebody was looking for the heart, courage, fire.
Right.
Somebody was looking for,
Home.
Dorothy was looking for her home.
Cancer.
And,
And
you
the
know,
lion
it's
was
just,
the big Capricorn. Yeah, it's great. It's just
Yeah.
it's so symbolic.
So, yeah, so this 21 Leo. So what I say to people for this particular star point is to look at your chart, if you know your chart, and to find out where 21 Leo is and see what house it's lighting up and see what planet it might be aspecting. Because if you have a planet at 21 of anything right now, it's going to be making some kind of either harmonic, you know, at some level of the harmonic, either
Right.
the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth, whatever, you know,
Perfectly right.
to your planet.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you know what's interesting about Venus, which would be worth bringing up, is that it does this five-pointed star loop, which is very much of a geometric construct. When it does its transit all the way around the entire wheel, it forms this wonderful five-pointed star, this sort of like this flower, this sort of lotus blossom almost.
Exactly.
Which is a remarkable
And-
piece of geometry. It just reinforces the geometry of the world and why there really is an underlying mathematical logic to all that we see.
Right, there is. And Venus is so symmetrical and so beautiful in this star. I looked at some of the other planets in terms of, you know, what patterns do they make? I mean, all the patterns make beautiful mandalas. All planets make beautiful mandalas of different shapes and kinds, but nobody really makes this almost perfect five-pointed star like Venus does. And so the 5 points, not just the 21 Leo that we're in right now, but let's say all 5 points of the star are what I call the star points of our time, the important signs of our time, and the important degrees of our time. And so the one that we had just before this Leo one 9 months ago was Scorpio, and that was at 3 degrees Scorpio. And the one before that was 18, almost 19 degrees Capricorn. So those degrees are important now, too, for this 8-year cycle.
And then the next ones beyond this, the next 9 months beyond this, will bring it into what? It brings us into
Gemini.
Gemini, yeah.
13 degrees Gemini. And the one after that goes back to Aries at about 6 degrees Aries. So these are the important signs.
And these vary for each year because there's a certain amount of flux within the orbit of, right? These change every year. These star points will change each year.
Well, from what we were just saying, like,
Yes.
you know, the 2018 was Capricorn, and then we had later in 2018, we had Scorpio, and now in 2019, we have Leo, and in 2020, we have Gemini, and 2021, we have Aries. But that completes the 5. But then in 2022, we go back to Capricorn where we were before.
Right.
And then back to Scorpio. Only the next Scorpio star point in 2022 will be Libra. It will be the Scorpio point for 100 years going into Libra. So we're going to have a much bigger kind of socio-political, economic, cultural shift going on in that 2022 star changing. In fact, I see the whole 2020s as a complete, like, if the earth is really going to transform and do the work that we all need to do and it needs to do to go into this next cycle and to survive, really, I think the 2020s is going to give us a very good opportunity for that.
I do too, and I think that's the greater lesson of all of it we're talking about, is that when I think that by the time that Jupiter and Saturn and Pluto all get together, it really is a signal for a large, responsible reconstruction of some sort. So this really is the tearing down that we're seeing now. I think is opening the door for the rebuilding that goes beyond. And hopefully that's a positive rebuilding and I think the lessons that we've learned through this last 4 or 5 years are those that will be reconstructed, reconsidered, and repaired as we get into that era.
Right.
Especially as Saturn moves into Aquarius, joined by Jupiter, that it's going to be a wonderful time. I really do see that as and of course it speaks to the collective, which I love because we're all on this planet together. We can only collectively repair we've done here. So we've got to join together. This is our common, our common chore, our common battle that we have to fight.
Right. And I have kind of a take on the change from Scorpio to Libra. There's 2 points I'd like to make about the 2022 shift. Actually, it goes into Libra in 2022, and then it comes back to Scorpio in 2026, 4 years later, at 0. But then by 2030, 4 years after that, it goes into Libra, where it will stay for 100 years.
I see.
So the 2020s have this continually shifting, like it goes into one sign and then it comes out. And so we're transiting over the cusp of Scorpio Libra. And I think that the end days of Scorpio, the last degrees of Scorpio for anything, and in this case it's the lower degrees instead of the higher degrees, is kind of witnessing the giant, I would say, purging or purification process that at least we are being made aware of that needs to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And as we come into these last years of Scorpio, I think a lot of these things are finally going to reach such a critical mass that nobody can look away from them anymore, that we're going to have to absolutely turn our attention to them if we want to survive.
Right. And that is what is the classic lesson of astrology, is that we are faced with hardship, we're faced with we can't ignore them any longer. We have got to, our face is in the fire, we've got to respond. And I think that's, in some ways, that's our redemption, because if we didn't have that sort of forcing function, we might become, lethargic and not do anything about it.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And we are, and mostly we do. We don't often do things or get up and act until it becomes, so impossible to live with the situation that we're in that we have no other choice.
Well, exactly, but that sort of speaks to the logic of the universe. I mean, these are all challenges. This is why I always refer to the squares in the chart as, even though they are difficult at the time, they still bring us to a place where we would not have gotten had they not been there. So they are important. They're prodders. They force us to make a move, and that gets us to the next step. And that step is very similar, like climbing the stairs. Like our life is a metaphor of climbing stairs. We're climbing stairs to reach a certain spot, and that is hard work going up, but the reward eventually comes, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I'm kind of interested in seeing what the 2020 Gemini star holds forth for the United States.
Oh, really? Big time.
Also 13 Gemini. It's also an election year. And did you know that every 4 years the election cycle of the U.S. is tied to the same repetitive Gemini star point?
Wow.
That's that comes in June,
Mm-hmm.
that is activated in June, which is usually when all the final primaries are.
Right.
Oftentimes, the June primaries are the deciding factor because so many states have June primaries, and that would be the time when the candidate, after all the rest of the candidates have been on parade
Mm-hmm.
during this Leo cycle, they're all on parade. They're all getting up on TV and showing their faces and telling us who they are. Some of them we've never seen before, some of them we know. But it's the Leo cycle that we're in now. That's the 9 months before the Gemini cycle that we're actually getting to know these candidates. And I will say that both sides of Leo are present there. The people who have great pride and are pounding their chest and saying, I can do this, I've done this is what I am and who I am. And others are, taking their first steps and summoning the courage to really get up there on the national stage and be scrutinized and criticized by millions of people for who they are
Mm-hmm.
and all of that. So it's kind of interesting that it's always like that, that the 9 months cycle before the Gemini star cycle for the election is Leo, and and I've always called it politicians on parade.
Mm-hmm.
It always looks like,
Makes
okay,
sense. Yeah. But let me ask you this: what does this Gemini cycle bode for the current occupant of the White House, who is a strong Gemini?
well, a lot. I mean, both Leo and Gemini
Right.
have been prominent in so many of the past presidents' charts.
Mm-hmm.
We have, in fact, I just made a list here
Well,
of
Barack Obama was a Leo. Bill Clinton was a Leo. George Bush was a Cancer.
George Bush was Leo rising.
George W. Bush, yeah. Mm-hmm.
George W. Bush was Leo rising. Donald Trump is Leo rising. And as you mentioned, Clinton and Obama were Leo suns.
Right.
So listen, the Venus star point activating Leo was no small thing for them. In fact, all 8 years of Clinton was the Venus star was transiting his sun.
Oh wow! So
And they were synchronized to the same degree for that whole
it makes sense. It's why he's still so popular in some ways.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it's funny, when Hillary was running in 2016 against Trump, and of course so many people had the foregone conclusion that she would be the winner, the Scorpio star point of the time was somewhere around 1 degree to 2 degrees Scorpio. That's exactly where her natal sun is. And so to have her out there with the sun transiting that at the same time was pretty awesome. But her Saturn was at somewhere, I don't have her chart in front of me, but it somewhere between 19 and 20, 21 Leo, somewhere around there. And also the Leo star point of that time when, as I said, the celebrities are showing us who they are and what they've got, was right on her Saturn. So we were seeing the sun and we were seeing Saturn. And unfortunately, we might like to say, oh, well, Saturn gives them strength and gives them, know-how. And we saw her experience. We saw that, she had been in the political foreground for a long time and had a lot of experience in different areas. But it still boiled down to Saturn, whether people could really accept her or not. And
Hard
whether,
lesson, yeah.
And how she had to fight so hard against him. And he comes in, waltzing in with the Gemini star right on his, by the way, he was born the same year as Bill Clinton, and also the same year as W.
Yes,
So
1946.
that makes 3 presidents with the same star point, which is Aquarius. They all have Aquarius star points, which is actually quite a big, what I would say, they get noticed.
They get noticed, yeah. And
The Leo
Obama had
really gets noticed.
yeah, Obama had an Aquarius rising, so that would definitely fit with him. He had both the Aquarius rising and the Leo sun.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So between the Leo Aquarius axis and the Gemini Sagittarius axis, we have almost all of our leaders going back way back. JFK was a Gemini,
Hmm.
um, and the Gemini star point actually came in while he was president. So we are saying something about, we call this a star, and we call people who were in the limelight stars. We call celebrities stars, even politicians who were popular, we call them stars. So I
And the
think it's
Venus
kind of
star point is a
interesting.
five-pointed star.
Yeah, and it is a star. It's the biggest star we've got
Hmm.
close to us, you know, that's really affecting things for us. So I'm looking at some of the different candidates in terms of what are we seeing from them now, especially even the lesser known ones that have been in the debates and coming into the political process of the presidency for the first time ever. Uh, and it's interesting because they have the other thing about Hillary's chart was that her Mars is also in Leo, just Mars and Saturn conjunct. And I'm going to, and that was like,
A tough aspect for her.
well, you know what I have realized about the American public, which shouldn't come as a surprise. I mean, I guess I would have realized this a long time ago, but women who are displaying their Mars, accessing their Mars, and
Hmm.
using their Mars in a very public way somehow get despised by the
Yes.
public.
They're seen as domination, as dominant,
Uh
and
huh.
and that may be very well what we're seeing with Elizabeth Warren because she has a similar kind of quality to her. That's sort of that fighter, and people I think are threatened by that in some way. It's not the soft, demure uh, personality they're looking for.
Well, and you're right, because Elizabeth Warren has a Mercury Mars conjunction in Gemini, where this next star point is going to be active and activating in her chart, which I think is kind of interesting. But back to Hillary's chart, Mars is at 14 Leo, exactly conjunct Pluto at 14 Leo, and Saturn's at 21. So it was definitely the Saturn that was getting the hit then and is still getting the hit now. It's a good thing she decided not to run again this time because I think she would, it would be the same kind of thing for her. Um, and she doesn't have the Gemini points. Uh, she doesn't have the connecting points, but she still has that Scorpio star point, the sun there. So I think it's not completely over with her yet. She's still going to be somehow valid in some area of
Yes,
life.
well, she could very well enter the stage during the coming time. As you know, she still has a presence on the force, whether people on the stage, on the world stage, and in the United States political spectrum in particular.
Absolutely.
And she may be very influential. It'll be interesting to see how both she and Barack Obama act in this time. And obviously, they're keeping the comments to themselves now, as they should. It's way too early, but I think that they're going to be huge influencers in what happens going forward. There's no question. I think.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the other woman that is displaying an exact Mars in Leo kind of configuration right now is Kamala Harris.
Yeah, that makes sense.
She has Mars precisely at 21 Leo,
Wow.
and this is the star point of the time. And when you see her up there, you see her shaking her fist. You see her Mars coming out. You see her getting aggressive and going after the other candidates with great vigor, great enthusiasm, and sharpness. I mean, you can tell she comes from a prosecutor. She's a prosecutor. She has that background. She knows how to do that kind of thing.
That's a huge benefit
And
for her because that's really where she gets her fire. That's where she gets her ammunition. Having that prosecutorial background allows her to answer those, to fire those questions off with precision that often leave her opponents dumbfounded in some respect. They don't quite know what to do with it because she's so right on.
Exactly. But again, it's her Mars. Will the public accept a strong female like her with her Mars coming out like that?
Yeah, she's got a softer. She's something not quite as severe about her as was the case with, say, Hillary. I think she's a little bit softer. That's just my perspective from out here.
Well, she's a Libra and Hillary's a Scorpio.
Right. Well, there you go. So that
That's
answers that
pretty
question.
good call.
Okay.
Pretty good call.
Yeah.
She's 27 Libra, which, by the way, when the star point leaves Scorpio and comes into Libra, not so much probably the 2022 to 2030 period, but again in 2030, it's all that star point's going to be transiting over late degrees of Libra, and her sun is 27, almost 28 Libra. Her moon is 27, almost 28 Aries. She was born exactly at a full moon. Sextile Saturn at 28 Aquarius.
So she's got some real power. If she doesn't make it this time, we might not hear we might hear from her again.
Exactly. She's got some clout, and she also has a very rare configuration in her chart called a hexagram.
Okay.
It's two grand trines.
Oh yeah.
Interlaced. It's a 6-pointed star.
Yeah. Yes. Of course. That's a wonderful thing. You're right.
And they're in air and fire. And she's got it with her sun, her moon, the nodes, the ascendant, Saturn, Mars, and that's it. That's pretty much it. But wow, that's a powerful chart.
It's a powerful chart. It is, and that's worth noting because I think it really brings to the fore the beauty of astrology and how accurate it is. I mean, this is where we see the personality emerge. We actually see this come to fruition as the live rolls on, and it's amazing. And for her to find that, so that's why that timing of that Libra Venus star point in 2022 would bring her into the midterms, I guess, of the next election cycle, which could bring her to a new spot. And then beyond that, in 2024,
right.
I would think would be also a key time for her. So if she doesn't make it this time, she could be the person who's next in line.
Yes, and that's a key point to remember, Chris, is that you think that the Venus star point at 21 Leo, once this 9-month period is over, it's over. But no, it's not. It's effective for the whole 8-year period because until it comes back, well, actually it started with the morning star Leo 4 years ago. And that's the other thing. It's an 8-year star cycle, but in 8 years, Venus actually completes 2 stars, not just one.
Okay, right.
A whole set of morning stars and a whole set of evening stars. And what that means is that, from inferior conjunction, it creates the morning star Venus. And from superior conjunction, it creates the evening star Venus. So there's really 2 stars in an 8-year period, and they're so close in degrees. Sometimes they're the same degree, sometimes they're less than a degree apart when they return. So I want people to realize that degree is active for usually a whole 8 years.
Yes, which would make sense for her. That's perfect timing. We could almost say we can see this coming down the road.
Yeah. And then with the Libra star coming in, also starting in 2022 and through 2030 and beyond, that's going to activate her sun in a very positive way, her moon, her Saturn, her ascendant. I mean, what more can you ask for? And her nodes.
Yeah, that's a cosmic gift of the highest order. There's no question about it. We're talking today with Arielle Guttman. She's the author of Venus Star Rising, which really is another way of interpreting astrology through the lens of Venus as a recurring theme. And the Venus is particularly useful because it's an inner planet. For one, it represents the harmony and beauty in our lives, but it also has a very strong geometric configuration to it that's repetitive throughout time, which I think is fascinating and speaks to the logic of mathematics within astrology. We're going to continue our conversation. We'll take a quick break here. We'll be back in about a few minutes, 2.5 minutes. I encourage you to get to her website, which is, what is your website? Sophia Venus?
SophiaVenus.com.
SophiaVenus.com. So SOPHIA Venus.com. SophiaVenus.com. I slipped my mind for a minute. Anyway, we'll be back in about 2.5 minutes. I encourage you to check out her website and look at her books. They're a fascinating way of reinterpreting astrology that's highly and very useful. So we'll be back in a few seconds. What is your destiny? Where are you going? What is your real purpose? Do you know? Do you want to know? Of course you do. It's your duty to yourself. We are all here for a reason, and we all have great potential. Discover all of this and more with a professional astrology reading. My name is Chris Flisher, and I can help you. Discover your strengths and work on your weaknesses, and live your life to its fullest capacity. Based on your birthday, birthplace, and birth time, an authentic astrology reading will allow you to live your life to the fullest and reveal your true purpose. Only real astrology can give you real information. It is your destiny, and it is your path. Write me at chris@chrisflisher.com and book a reading today, or call me at 978-393-1036. That's 978-393-1036. www.chrisflisher.com.
Astrology is the science of spirit, and it can serve as an invaluable aid in making the difficult choices in life and seeking truth in all the directions we choose. It holds the potential to allow each of us to evolve to our highest potential. It is the logic of the universe, the code of existence, and the pathway to true wisdom. It is our duty to draw from it the instructions for our lives and to live them to our fullest potential. As the great wheel turns, we are best prepared when we are best informed.
As the world shrinks and our barriers come down, diverse cultures are striving for harmony, balance, and peace. To ease the transition, we need to expand with color, light, and tolerance. Now, you can become a global citizen and embrace the color and clear spirit with the divine artwork of the mandala. Mandalas are a timeless artistic offering for creating unity, harmony, and peace. My name is Chris Flisher, and I've spent years creating mandalas, and they are now available online at www.turningofthewheel.com. Come and experience the world of color, form, and function with t-shirts, coffee mugs, note cards, and limited edition prints. These vibrant, lively paintings and products express optimism, oneness, and spiritual balance for all who use them. www.turningofthewheel.com. That's www.turningofthewheel.com. And enter a world of possibility and color. Okay, welcome back. My guest today on Turning of the Wheel is Arielle Guttman. She's been a guest of mine in the past, one of my favorite guests. And she is the author of Venus Star Rising, among other great astrology books. But we're talking about Venus today because we're coming up on what's called a Cazimi, which is happening in the next couple days. That's why I wanted to get the podcast out before those days come. Coming up next week, we've got great alignment with the Sun and Venus together. And a Cazimi is an astrological as well as astronomical term, which means the two planets are at the same degree at the same time. And that is at, 21 degrees Leo next week, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The 13th, the night of the 13th, if you live in the Pacific time zone, or in Hawaii, and the rest of the world will see it on the early morning or sometime during the 14th of August.
So each of us has this point in our charts somewhere, and the important piece is to know where that is and how it impacts other parts of your chart, because it can be a huge benefit to know where these are, and especially if you find yourself in a decision-making mode or something like that where things look right or you don't know whether to make a move or what to do. This can be an incredibly valuable point because it usually is an incredibly optimistic, expansive, warm and supportive aspect that can be, if you use it properly to your advantage, can really be quite helpful, I think. At least it has been for me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And I'm looking at it in my own chart all the time, too, and seeing, like we always do with astrology, new things pop up all the time, new awarenesses, and how that this thing called the Venus star, it's like a clock. It's like with the precision of a Swiss clock. This mechanism has been working kind of silently, unobserved in the background, behind the planets, behind the zodiac for a very long time, because it's not something we actually see. When Venus and the Sun kiss, you don't see Venus. She's in the shadow. She's
in the
behind.
shadow, right.
You only see the Sun. So if you're looking at the Sun, let's say you're watching the Sun at sunset or sunrise right now, you'll be able to see, just think about Venus being that close to the Sun, or right in front of it or behind it, in this case behind it.
It's behind the Sun, but it didn't 8 years ago it transited in front of the Sun, correct?
Yeah,
Yes,
and that was what was called the transit of Venus when we
transit of
got to
Venus.
see, and that's the only time we actually get to see Venus and when it's conjunct the sun is during those transits.
Hmm.
But those transits only happen every 120 years or so.
Right. But
So
It's
we
the
got
Venus
to see
star
it
point
in
that is the
2012,
yeah, it's
you
the
know.
Venus star point that is the basis for navigation as we know it today. Because it wasn't until they discovered the triangle, they needed a triangulation. They derived it by triangulation based on the sun, the moon, and I believe Venus in order to get the coordinates for for latitude. I think it was latitude or longitude. I get those confused all the time. I believe it was latitude that they were able to find.
Longitude is
Longitude.
the straight up and down
Right.
lines, and latitude are the ones that go sideways.
Right. So it was the sideways. The latitude was what they were able to discover, I think. And once they discovered the transit of Venus, they were able to form that formula, which gave them the coordinates back on Earth.
Yeah, there are some really famous journeys that were made, like to the South Seas and wherever it was visible, the Venus transit in times past of the 18th century transit and the 19th century transit. I think the first transit that's ever been written about was the one in the 1600s.
Hmm.
Before that, we don't know too much really about the history of the Venus transit or if people on Earth even knew that it existed, because I don't think it was until the invention of telescopes and some of the astronomical devices and the mathematicians of that time that were able to figure out the whereabouts of Venus and how exactly it was connected.
But if you go back historically and trace that same pattern that you have devised for your Venus star cycle, you would go back in history to a time when that did occur and finally find and probably find an event that correlated to that.
Right.
Even though it be beyond the 1640s into the 1500s and 14, because it's always been there. So
It's always been there.
there would be times when
Yeah.
there would be a correlative historical problem or event that happened at the time,
Hmm.
most likely.
And I'm sure that the sky watchers in whatever culture was happening around the world, the Chinese or the Mayan or
Hmm.
whoever, had records of that. The Maya kept meticulous records of Venus rises and sets and conjunctions and this and that. And I think in the codices that they left behind, and they had a temple dedicated just to Venus, a beautiful temple in Uxmal. I've been to that one. And they said that the guide that took us there said that a lot of most of the books from that library there were burned by the
Right.
Spanish when they occupied. But there were like hundreds, maybe even thousands of documents recording what they saw with Venus and recording astronomical having notations. So I'm wondering if, only a few of those survived, and the ones that have survived have given us quite a bit of information, but it's only probably a thimbleful compared to what there was.
Right. Exactly. And these are significant points because you can trace them back historically, and they have this. They're very present in our lives, whether we realize it or not, because we don't pay attention. Perhaps all of us on a regular basis, we may not understand the greater meaning. But there's a theme that rotates around this time when these points connect, and if they connect in your life personally, and they make a direct aspect either by conjunction, square, or trine, you're going to see the impact of it. So it's important to know where they are.
Exactly. hmm
And I encourage you to reach out to Arielle to help discover that, because you can find enormous information in it. You'll have many aha moments. Let's put it that way when you hear about it, because you'll see how the accurate precision of it works with regard to in your own personal life, which I always find fascinating.
Exactly. So, have you looked at the Venus star in your chart for this cycle around?
I do know where it is. Yes, it's conjunct my natal Pluto in my 11th house, and it is going to be trining my natal Jupiter in my 8th house and my natal Mercury in my 8th house. So it's going to be squaring my natal Mars in my 3rd house in Scorpio. So there's a
Oh,
lot of.
that's a lot of action.
Yeah,
That's
I
a
know.
lot.
I've got a very active chart, unfortunately, or not. I mean, it's just that's my cross to bear. So I see them, and you see this sort of thing happening, especially like with in my 11th house across my Pluto. You could easily say that there's a certain that might point to my position, my role within the greater astrological community of some sorts. I don't know if that makes sense to you. It seems like it does to me. Have some value there. just by being in the realm of it and being a player, so to speak. But yeah, and I've had this aspect before, and it's always been sort of a time for me to. There were many times when I saw this happen to me when I came to a sort of a revelation of sorts or had an epiphany of sorts that helped point me in the right direction. So I think it's very valid.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you were just so this is falling on more conjunction on your Pluto, which is what, 21?
21, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, so it's right on your Pluto.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, you and Marianne Williamson, because she has 21 Leo Pluto also.
Well, a lot of people do of my generation. Anybody who's
That's right.
of that generation, yeah. I mean, yours is probably a little bit further, a little bit.
Mine's 15,
15,
yeah.
yeah, right. But this whole generation would be having that, which is sort of indicative of this generation's time to really make things right that were wrong. And I see her as an incredibly powerful voice for this. I saw her on the Bill Maher show the other night. And she is really eloquent. And, there's so many people that say, wow, she's right about what she says. And she is right about what she says. It's remarkable to see that. And it's very encouraging. She really sort of is a perfect antidote to all that we have going wrong right now. That's what I find to be interesting. It's that dualistic quality.
Well, you want to know how her her personal star point is connected to the U.S.?
I'd love to know, yeah.
She is 3-degree Cancer Venus star point. Okay. And the USA Venus is 3-degree Cancer.
Okay, that's a perfect
Now,
right on the money. Yeah.
for somebody to be getting up on stage and saying we need a Department of Peace and Justice and that her message is love is like, who else would be a better fit for that? 3 degrees Cancer. It's right on the U.S. Venus, okay? The Venus star point to the Venus. That's a beautiful combination. Now, her star point, and this is the way I interpret star points, her VSP is in Cancer, and so are a lot of people born when she was born in that 9-month period. As you mentioned, you're probably one of them. You both have 21 Leo Pluto. But the ruler of her star point, the ruler of the Cancer star point is the moon. And so everybody has that at a different place. Guess where her moon is? Her moon is 27 Capricorn, right on the U.S. Pluto.
Right on the U.S. Pluto. Wow, she's almost as if she's, manifest destiny.
Manifest destiny. I got chills when I first saw that connection there, and how she has waited not just this lifetime, but probably many, many lifetimes to be in this place at this time right now, to say what she's saying and to do what she's doing.
I'm getting goosebumps. Wow, you're right.
That's just too synchronistic on too many levels to be an accident.
And for her, she is the exact, she's the perfect antidote for where we are right now with this division and abundance of hatred and violence. She really comes along and just is the welcome relief from all of that.
Exactly.
She has some challenges to overcome just because of the political spectrum and where she's been. But, people, I think at this point, by the time the election comes around, a lot can happen, no question about it. But because she offers such a soft approach and a more logical, heart-based, maternal approach, she really is the perfect. I think we're long overdue for a female president leader. This is where we're going. It's taking achingly slow to get there, but I do believe we will get there. And whether it's her, whether it's Kamala Harris, or whether it's Elizabeth Warren down in 2022, or wherever that may be,
Tulsi Gabbard.
Exactly, too, yeah.
Nice too.
Also, yeah.
I mean, all of these women that are expressing their, I don't know too much about Amy.
Klobuchar.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't researched her, but all these other charts I have looked at, and they all have something to say. They all have something really important to contribute, and they're all connected in some way to the U.S. chart.
Well, if nothing else, I think that she brings a certain eloquence and a certain elegance and a certain educational, intellectual quality to the conversation that is not base and not vile and not childish and immature by name calling. She sort of just rises above all that and says, why are you talking like this? What is it that you're learning from? Are you really making your life better by calling somebody a poor old sleepy jet or whatever you do? You know, this is just a whole respin of this terrible negative dialogue we have ongoing now that is just like
Right.
a mother saying no to a child. You know, like
Exactly.
washing the child's mouth out with soap, which is what this mother should do to this child.
And she's a Cancer star point. Who better to be the mother?
Yeah, wash
And
that
say,
man's mouth out with soap now. Get it?
come on,
Yeah,
stop fighting, stop talking this way, stop doing these things,
grow
be
up.
nice to each other.
Exactly. Very common sense, and it's a wonderful thing. I mean, this is when we really begin to get. I do get goosebumps about astrology when I see these sort of things happening because they are just so prescient and so perfectly aligned. You're like, thank somebody's in charge here. You know.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Right.
So she's someone to watch for sure. You know, she's obviously a long shot. She's obviously hasn't got a lot of the things, but you think if she got as far as even vice president or something like that, or even if she would become a cabinet member, just having her in the realm of this political spectrum would be a positive outcome. You know, maybe she becomes a Secretary of State. Maybe she becomes.
Well,
Maybe they open
maybe
the Department of Peace. Exactly. There you go.
Maybe the Department of Peace will be newly created by one of these Democrats, and she will be the head of that. I think she's, certainly fits that. Of course, everybody says, "Oh, well, what kind of experience does she have to be president?" But let's look at our current president.
Exactly. Nobody has experience. They're
How
not-
can you even ask that question anymore after
this, of course not. You can't. There's no question about it. So that is not really a question anymore. I don't think that requires. I think what it requires is a sense of a singleness of purpose, a strong set of values, a moral ethic, a regard for the quality things in life, an optimism, a sense of expansion, all of which she seems to have, and a sense of love at the bottom of it all, a sense of nurturing love, and the fact that she's there at that sun sign with the Venus star point of 3 degrees is just phenomenal. I love that.
Yeah, definitely.
It's really a phenomenal thing. So, the Venus star point, I think, holds great value for people. So how would people, if and when they discover their star points, how would they best utilize their star points? Are there star points times in their own personal lives when they are replicated again that they should act a certain way or that they should try to manifest certain things? Is this a harbinger for a time where you can make a significant positive change in your life? If you have a star point coming up that's going to be transiting by the sun or another major planet?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, all of that. So the first thing they would do is look at where does the star point fall in their chart, by what sign, by what house, and how that is a natal condition or configuration that gives them a certain kind of sparkle and luster and talent and joy for life, and what they can act from naturally, what kind of talent they have naturally, not anything they really have to develop. Now, in some cases, I have seen where people were not expressing or living their star points the way they should. But a lot of times the questions in cases like that, when people come to see me for astrological consultation, the things that they're asking about, like, how do I develop this? How do I do that? How do I do this? When do I do this? Is there ever going to be an opportunity? It all comes back to their star point of what they know they need to do, but maybe they just don't know how to get there.
Right.
So that's one. But then there's the transits. Like you said, the Venus star itself is a slow-moving clock. It's like the hour hand on the clock that moves a little more slowly, and maybe even more like a yearly hand on the clock, where as it slowly transits around the wheel, it's going to activate different points in your life. For instance, this Leo evening star at 21 Leo is a follow-up of the Virgo star point. Like a lot of people in our generation were born with a Virgo star point,
Right.
and they might be a Virgo evening star. And if that's the case, this is an 8-year return cycle for you of Venus, because Leo was a continuation of Virgo when Virgo
Right.
terminated. Then the inception of Leo occurred at the same time. So that was in the 80s. So if you were born before the mid-'80s, you're a Virgo star point. If you were born after the '80s, you're a Leo star point. If you're this particular
generation. Yeah,
of the five.
my primary Venus star point is at 10 degrees Virgo, which will
Okay, so
so later in
are
August.
you an evening or a morning?
That I don't know. I don't recall that. I know that I'm a 10 Virgo and that I'm going to be, on August 29th, Venus will be sitting right on my Venus star point, which seems to be like,
Okay, well, so where's your natal Venus?
my natal Venus is 20 degrees Pisces in my sixth,
In Pisces, and your sun is
12 degrees Aries.
okay. Well, since Venus is behind your sun, you're a morning star.
Morning star. Okay, that's good to know. But interesting enough, my other Venus star points in my 5-point spread, I also have 3 degrees Cancer as my next one down. 23 degrees Aries, 11 Aquarius, and 21 Scorpio. And
Right.
people, those of you who are listening, I determined all those by referencing Arielle's book, Venus Star Rising, the new cosmology for the 21st century, which you can get from her website, Sophia Venus, or Venus Sophia, Sophia Venus, I'm sorry, sophiavenus.com. And I was able to determine these 3 points, and I keep them in my phone on a notepad so that I know when those points are going to be activated, and I pay special attention to them, and I find them to be incredibly helpful.
Okay, well, that's good. That's cool. The other place where the listeners can find a PDF of the Venus star dates is on is on the website that you just mentioned, and you can transfer it to your phone. And also, when you look at it, you can just always look at the one previous to the one you were born. Like your birth date's most likely going to fall between two dates, because the dates are only every 9 months when the Cazimi happens.
Right.
So let's say you were born in July and the Cazimi happened in April of the same year you were born.
That's your
but
primary.
The next one won't happen until the February of the next year. You always would go back to the April one, not
Right.
forward to the February one.
So it's
And
based
that's
on your
pet
it's
one.
based on your nearest date of your birth, right? That's what you go by. You
Well,
go
not so much the nearest, but the nearest previous to your birth.
nearest previous to your birth. That's what I meant. Yes, yes. So
Yeah.
I was born in 52. My Venus, my primary Venus star point at 10 degrees Virgo is in September of 1951. So that's the closest one prior to my birth, which was that's about 6 months before my birth.
Exactly.
7 months before
A
my
little
birth.
over 6 months,
Yep.
because you've got Venus in Pisces pretty much in an opposition to your Venus in Virgo star point.
Right.
So that's your, you know how you introduce your show, a show about, was it art, science, and
No, it calls astrology, art, and spiritual adventure. Astrology, art, and spiritual.
astrology, art, and spiritual adventure? Okay. And I think it's a great way to combine all those things, the Virgo, Pisces, Venus there.
Yeah, well, you know what it is? I sort of wanted a wide umbrella so I wouldn't be limited to only speaking about astrology. I like to speak about other things sometimes. I like to speak about history. I like to speak about the presence of art. I love all metaphysical topics. And so I have a wide umbrella that allows me to really pull in a lot of different topics, which is what I think makes it more interesting in some way, because they're all connected.
But you are an artist as well.
Yes,
and
I am, right,
see
yeah.
your beautiful mandalas
Yeah.
and works of art all over when when I look at your website and when I watch your show and so forth. And so I think this double Venus connection that you have is pretty potent.
Yeah, well, you can't really run away from it. This is another thing about astrology I'd like to point out now is that I may have spent much of my life doing other things. You get distracted by children, mortgages, insurance policies, and all that stuff. But eventually, I think this is the way astrology works. We may not all arrive at where we're supposed to be at the same time, but I use the analogy of the cuckoo clock, where all these things are spinning around inside our bodies, and one day everything clicks and boom, you arrive when the cuckoo comes out of the clock. And that's a metaphor for sort of how astrology works. I know many of my clients get impatient when I say, well, you've got this great potential here. And they say, well, I'm working at Walmart, or I'm working at the insurance company. I can't stand it. Eventually, life, I think, will get you to a point where either you have to flee, or events will get you to a spot which then eventually gets you to your real true purpose, which is manifested by the layout of your chart. I think that does happen. It just is a question of how patient you are and how long you live and when that does arrive. But I do believe it does arrive.
Exactly. Hmm.
So,
And then the other thing you were asking me about it, so I look at the transits when it lights something up in your life, a certain planet, like we were talking about before, it hitting Trump's stuff in Gemini and Hillary Clinton's sun and Kamala Harris's Mars. And by the way, with that Mars, Trump also has Mars in Leo.
on the
And I
ascendant,
thought,
yeah.
so far of all the charts I've looked at, she seems to have the only Mars in Leo that is really actually a worthy opponent to him that I think could stand on stage next to him and debate him more or less in a fierce way, not through bullying or intimidation like he does, but more like really being able to stand up to him and
I think she would rip him to pieces just by sticking by the truth. It's all she has to do, and she'd be very good about that because she's a prosecutor. She has the skills.
Exactly.
She knows how to manipulate. She knows how to work her way around the stage, and she's a brilliant prosecutor in that regard. So she would be somebody that he should fear if it ever comes to that.
So this is the example of how the star points work in her life. She's a Gemini star point by birth.
Oh,
okay.
And
that connects to her chart in a really good way. That hexagram we were talking about.
Right.
It fits right in there. But the thing that's happening now in 2019, 21 degrees Leo star point. She's waited her whole life for this star point to get to her natal Mars. And here it is now waking it up, and it's going to be lit and awakened for the next 8 years.
Wow. So she's going to be a force to be reckoned with in some capacity. So she, again, is another person who could easily, whoever wins, but, you're always, the administration is as best as its people who are is as good as the people who are part of it, which is clearly the case with what we have now. We have a mess of people who are all, corrupt individuals are undoing EPA standards and stuff like that. But if the next candidate, if that is a Democrat, were to populate their offices and their cabinet with people who are such as Kamala Harris and Marianne Williamson, you can see how that would just totally change the fabric of America.
Mm-hmm. Well,
open for business again.
I think the candidate who represents the people is important. In other ways, I actually don't think anything they do or say matters because there's another force operating behind the scenes.
Oh, that's true.
Now, that's just my idea about it. And I know other people share it. I don't know if everybody shares that idea, but I do feel that our country has gotten co-opted, by certain moneyed interests and corporations, and they kind of run the political thing now, the show, the way they want to run it. So all I can say about the candidates is whoever serves, there's got to be something between whoever serves the needs of the people on one hand really well and who's also complying with the other people who run things behind the scenes really well, that the candidate that's going to be chosen is going to be a composite of both those sides.
I agree. And that's the only way we will ever move forward is if we get that, because you've got to appease both sides. You have to do that. Mm-hmm. You just can't avoid it.
Yeah. So I'm having a lot of fun right now. I don't usually have fun watching all this whole political process.
No, nobody does. But because it's so accurate to the astrology, it's really intriguing. One thing I'd like to know, and I think the audience would like to know as well, is once they discover their Venus star points and they have, say, a conjunction of a Venus star point in their life, what is it? What does that portend? Does that portend an opportunity? Is that just a pleasant time? Is it just a nice day, walk in the park or a day at the beach? Or does it have a greater meaning, do you think?
Well, I think the Venus star point will probably transit every planet in your chart at some point in your life, either by conjunction or opposition. Mm-hmm. Because whatever sign your star point is in, you will never see it make an opposition, the star point, because it's a different timeline.
Right.
But you might have planets, so you'll have planets either conjunct or opposition that. And like I was saying about, for instance, that example of Kamala and Marianne. Marianne has it for the first time in her life conjunct her natal Pluto. That's being awakened for the next 8 years, as is yours, okay? Mm-hmm. You were telling me about you're going through a period of downsizing and simplifying and purging, things right now in your material world. And so of things. And that's a Pluto thing.
It is,
So,
very much so, yeah.
So it's awakening that part of you, the Pluto part, but it's also awakening sort of an inner power and strength, almost like a destiny point.
It is. It is. I see that.
For Marianne in a different way with her South Node, it's awakening her maybe commitment from a long, long time ago of a call to action to really speak about the unspeakable things, or to represent the people who don't have the power.
And I think we as a species are ready for the message that Marianne Williamson is bringing. I believe, as at my core, that we have reached a point in time where this is no longer considered to be fluffy, airheady kind of woo-woo philosophy. People now see the real value. We've had enough empirical data to show that this is the way forward, where we've got science and doctors and psychologists and metaphysicians all agreeing that this is the way to go. This is how we evolve in our greatest way. So in many ways, she is simply bringing a conversation to our table that we're now ready to receive, where we may not have been ready to receive that 10 years ago.
And that's the beauty of the Venus star, because she has been preaching this kind of stuff for 30, 40 years, right? 10 years ago, we were not ready for that message. But post 2016 election, and the mess that the country really seems to be in right now, this is the time for the message.
It's exactly the right antidote. It's the time to put the calamine lotion on the poison ivy.
Exactly.
It really is. We are in a very touchy spot. It's time for the iodine, or whatever metaphor you want to use. It's time. And she might be the right person. So just the fact that she's on the stage and her name was the most Googled after the second debate, I mean, that shows that people's awareness is totally tuned to her. And they're probably picking up on her message, and they're seeing the way she carries herself and the message she says. She's not a flake. She's a real person to be reckoned with. And we should be very thankful that she's there, because she couldn't have come at a better time. And
exactly.
I'm very happy about that. Well, we have come to the end of the show. It's great to have my friend Arielle Guttman on. She's the author of The Venus Star Rising, A New Cosmology for the 21st Century. I encourage you to get it. It's a wealth of information in there, or contact her directly. But if nothing else, find out where your Venus star points are. They are distinct parts of your chart, and when planets get those points in your chart, you need to be aware of them, because they are action points that can be very beneficial to you and help you find your greater purpose. So, Arielle, thank you so much for coming on and for your great wisdom and your love of astrology. I certainly appreciate it so much.
Yes, and I just want to say one more thing. If you go to my website, there is a webinar coming up next Thursday strictly on the Venus star and the Venus star points with the CIA. And if you'd like to sign up for that, that's Thursday, August 15th at 3:30 Pacific, 6:30 Eastern.
And you have links to that on your website?
Yeah, and okay. I'm going to go really deeply into much more of you'll get to view some of these charts we've been talking about, a lot of the political process right now and how the Venus star works and moves. So if you want to see the actual images and graphics of what it looks like in a chart and how it moves, and what's in store for us during this cycle.
That's the place to go.
That's look it up there.
And by the way, folks, CIA does not mean Central Intelligence Agency. It means Cosmic Intelligence Agency, which is located down in New Zealand, I believe, or Australia.
Melbourne, Australia.
With Julia Simas, and so you can find that down there. She's on Facebook as well, as you are. So,
I hope they didn't think I was speaking for the actual CIA here in Washington.
Well,
no.
I hope not. Yeah, that's what I wanted to be sure I clarified that.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying that.
Anyway,
thank you, Chris, for having me on the show. Yeah. Again, it's been a pleasure.
SophiaVenus.com is Arielle's website. Venus Star Rising is her book. Find out your Venus star points and see what they present to you and what they offer you as a gift. And Arielle, thank you so much. I hope to see you around this circuit soon.
Okay.
Take care.
Chris.
Bye-bye.
Ciao.
You've been listening to Turning of the Wheel with your host, Chris Flisher. To schedule a reading with me or to order artwork, you may visit my website at www.turningofthewheel.com. That's www.turningofthewheel.com. Or you can call me at 978-393-1036. Thank you. And as always, Be open to possibilities.